would have to have set up conditions that would have set the rules in whatever universe they were trying to create to test. And it might explain why this universe is like on the edge of a razor blade in terms of the conditions that favor life as opposed to no life.
They had learned that life had started to populate throughout that universe.
They had made.
Yeah, they were fascinated by this. Curious as can be how this was possible. And this doorway that I'd gone through was something that they had put in place. They had these doorways throughout our universe in various places. They had been sending scientists in there to study the universe because this was a whole new realm of science for them to explore. And when they started discovering life in there, well, they were pretty shocked. Apparently, I'm not the only person who'd ever come through that doorway. And apparently, these doorways go to other places on this planet as well as to other planets. So maybe these folks that were coming through had figured out how to direct their travels. According to this voice I was talking to, there is a way to direct where you're going, but my only concern at that point was, how do I get back?
Okay, is it possible that the beings that Pedro was referring to as a shaman would be the intelligence in this other universe in which we're nested? The other universe would come through to test their laboratory experiment, creating this universe that surprised them because it was evolving with life in it. Anything that was seen emerging from that doorway that you went through would be from the experimenters in the other universe that encompasses us.
I think that that's very possible because, as I mentioned, time is much different there than it is here, and they might have been through and thinking that the Inca or whoever would have succeeded them were dressed in a certain way the last time they were through, so the next time they go through, they dress like that. They're royalty. They can walk around wherever they want to go, and no one's going to give them any grief.
But they're not royalty. They're actually scientists from another universe.
Yeah, exactly. That voice that I was talking to was telling me that part of their interest was that when they looked outward, things just expanded out and out and out, but there were things that were identical out there as there were deeper and deeper they looked into the smallest things, that it was always the same. It's the same if it was an atom versus a galaxy. They were trying to understand their place in the universe. What they didn't expect was to find that there was a universe that they were within and that there was a universe that they surrounded. It was quite an astonishing thing to have discovered for them.
If they discovered that they were inside of another universe and that they had made a universe that they surrounded, then maybe even an infinite number of universes nest within each other.
I think that's what the implication is, that there isn't an upper or lower limit.
And what is the relationship now between their universe and this one?
Oh, I haven't a clue. I could not understand his definition of time. The only thing that I can figure is that the means of moving from one point to another was outside the dynamic of time altogether. That these doorways are instantaneous passageways to other places. You know, you can be somewhere for a while, go back through it, and arrive just shortly after you left.
Which is saying that there is time travel through these doorways that the other universe created in order to study this universe.
When it comes to moving through these things, I don't know how time works. You know, it was the same situation when I was talking with Zoe. He was telling me that they could go from where they are to here, and that it would be almost instantaneous. There really wasn't any time during the time of travel. Time stopped, and then it restarted once you arrived.
What are you left with now, the end of 2016, as a residue of that idea that we are in a simulated universe created by someone else?
What it's left me with is a sense of awe. The thing that I find to be most remarkable is that at least between this universe and that one, there are beings who are aware of themselves and aware of their surroundings. it is that spark of life that joins us, no matter what universe we're in. I know there's life out there among those stars. Somehow there's a veil. Somehow there's this barrier, this thing that I passed through twice. So this commonality of life, I find that to be awe-inspiring. No matter where you go, there's a spark of intelligence and a spark of life out there. And it can be quite good.
Now, how many of you have heard about or read this book, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot? Maybe 25 people? I'm not sure, maybe 30. Well, The Holographic Universe was first released as a hardcover by HarperCollins in 1991. This particular conference in the Lou Farish era would have been 2 years old. And around that same time, I spoke at another Midwestern conference along with human abduction researcher Bud Hopkins. And that new book by this young man who was only 38 years old at the time, and its mind-blowing hypothesis that our universe was being projected by something else, maybe from another dimension, was the topic of so many discussions at that conference in 1991. And a holographic universe, the way it is described by Michael Talbot, would be one where all of the information, all the zeros and ones for everything, from black holes to quarks, that makes up what we call three-dimensional reality, and you have to add time as another dimension, is actually contained in a two-dimensional surface that is projecting what we conscious creatures see and move through as three-dimensional space-time. And think about the cards that you might have, the credit cards, where they have the hologram now, and IDs. It's a flat surface, but when you have the light, when light hits it in just the right way, it projects outward. Well, after that conference, Bud and I had the same airline flight back east to New York and Philadelphia, where I lived at the time. Bud and I sat next to each other to talk about some new abduction cases, and he surprised me when he said, quote, "Linda, I'll tell you something confidentially. Michael Talbot has been one of my UFO abduction cases. But he doesn't want anyone to know that because he is afraid that if people knew the truth, they might not read his book." And Michael told me the truth is that the entire universe, the entire holographic universe in his book, Concept, that he has written about, was given to him in telepathic downloads by the extraterrestrials who have been abducting him, close quote. Now, sadly, Michael Talbot died 1 year later at age 39 from lymphocytic leukemia. And then Bud Hopkins died in 2011. And now it's 2017. And as an increasing number of scientific papers and headlines are asking that question, are we living in a holographic universe created by a computer simulation? I think it is okay now to say that Michael Talbot's abduction secret that he went to his grave with is that his 1990 book, The Holographic Universe, that you will, I hope, read if you haven't read, is consistent with what more and more scientists are trying to figure out, if this is a computer simulated universe. The book and now have come to the same place. 2 months ago, on January 30th, 2017, theoretical physicists and astrophysicists from the University of Southampton in the UK and the University of Waterloo in Canada and the University of Salento in Italy published in Physical Review letters, quote, substantial evidence, that's very unusual for physicists, substantial evidence, close quote, that we are living in a holographic universe. And that is exactly what Michael Talbot was experiencing in the 1980s with other intelligences, and ended up working with Bud Hopkins, and then finally released the book, The Holographic Universe, in 1991. Now here is an illustration that the physicists used in their new paper formerly entitled From Planck Data to Planck Era Observational Tests of Holographic Cosmology. This is current physics. Time runs from left to right. The beginning is deliberately fuzzy and continues becoming clearer and clearer, because the scientists think that at the true beginning of this universe, that is the beginning of the holographic phase, and that everything was in a mix of coming into what we would call rule sets. So those first two gray ovals are small and blurry to illustrate their contention that space and time were not yet well defined. And then by the third oval of grays, whites, and blacks in here, the universe enters what the scientists call a geometric phase, which can then be described by mathematical equations such as Einstein's general relativity from the early 20th century. And studying our universe's cosmic microwave background is what they have been doing, that was left over from the singularity that was the big burst that, who knows, might have been that spark in the other dimension that Jerry Wills was being told about. And our universe erupts in this big bang. Well, today, the scientists can detect large amounts of data embedded in that white noise or those microwaves left over from that moment that the universe exploded into this dimension and kept growing. And studying that data in the cosmic microwave background, these modern Earth scientists were able to compare networks of features in the data to modern quantum field theory. And they found that some of the simplest quantum field theories can explain nearly all cosmological observations of this early universe. So in their new paper, they conclude that about 375,000 years after the universe's geometric phase, in the third oval of this illustration, they begin to see what they call imprints of information about the very early universe. And the scientists hypothesize that when the development of star and galaxy structure began to evolve up to what we call the current time, this is what we see, and that they are penetrating with their study of the microwave back further and further and finding zeros and ones essentially imprinted in the fabric, the very fabric of this cosmos. Now, there is a Professor Kostas Skandaras of mathematical sciences at the University of Southampton in England, and he says, quote, "Holography is a huge leap forward in the way we think about the structure and creation of the universe. Einstein's theory of general relativity explains almost everything large-scale in the universe, but starts to unravel when examining its origins and mechanisms at the quantum levels. Scientists have been working for decades to combine Einstein's theory of gravity and quantum theory, and some people believe the concept of a holographic universe has the potential for the first time to reconcile the two. And imagine that everything you see, feel, and hear in 3 dimensions plus time, in fact, emanates from another dimension's in a flat 2-dimensional projection that creates this 3 dimension. The idea is similar to that of ordinary holograms, where a 3-dimensional image, like think Disney World, is encoded in a 2-dimensional surface. And however, this time It's not the beautiful figures dancing to our eyes and mind on a floor at Disney World. And it seems so miraculous. And remember, the projector and the holograms can never be in the same place. The projector is always in another room, projecting the holograms. But this time, what we're talking about is it's our entire universe that is encoded and being projected. So now we're back to that panel discussion a year ago in New York. Is this a computer simulated universe? Well, this physicist says enthusiastically, yes, we're in a computer simulated universe. Tom Campbell, born December 9th, 1944, says he has now done more than 400 YouTube videos on that very question. Tom likes to call himself an applied physicist because he never finished his PhD in experimental nuclear physics at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. He broke off from his university work to be a systems analyst with the Army Technical Intelligence in the Foreign Science and Technology Center, also in Charlottesville, Virginia. That is now called the National Ground Intelligence Center. In 1972, he worked for Robert Monroe, the author of the 1971 groundbreaking book, Journeys Out of the Body. Tom Campbell helped Robert Monroe develop the HemiSync technology for teaching how to go out of body, which Monroe would use in his formal Monroe Institute, finally established as a laboratory to study consciousness. Later, Tom Campbell worked for the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, in a group called Space and Missile Defense Agency from 1983 to the mid-1990s. And then Tom Campbell retired from government assignments. But he has never stopped working on his conviction that this is a simulated universe by something projecting information from another dimension that caused the original digital Big Bang. Tom is a co-author on a brand new paper soon to be published this year entitled On Testing the Simulation Hypothesis. His colleagues are Caltech mathematician Uman Owadi in Pasadena. I got to spend 12 hours with this mathematician in February with another person, and it was discussing all of this, and it was incredible. His colleagues are Caltech mathematician and physicist Joe Savageau from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, also in Pasadena, and David Watkinson, who produces digital animation of virtual reality simulations in Hollywood. Tom Campbell's concept behind this new simulation paper is that our entire universe was simulated by some intelligence to be what he calls an entropy reduction trainer for souls. Now, right before we hear Tom Campbell discuss this, for those of you who may not have dealt with entropy as a concept before, it usually refers to the idea that everything in this universe keeps moving from order to disorder, losing energy along the way. And this is why in this universe, we can take a glass and we can throw it against a wall and it will shatter. In a universe where entropy may not dominate, who knows what might happen, but it might not be possible to break a glass. In our universe, the second law of thermodynamics says entropy always increases in this universe. And that happens as energy is transferred or transformed, and more energy is wasted, and so there is a natural tendency of any isolated system to degenerate into a more disordered state. The bottom line of the second law of thermodynamics is you can't unscramble a broken egg. So what do? We keep eggs in cartons to help sustain order that protects the eggs until you need them. Sustaining order is an example of what physicist Tom Campbell calls entropy reduction. He thinks that the challenge for souls in this universe is to learn how to reduce entropy, which means counteracting disorder and moving toward more order, love, and cherishing life, instead of disorder, hate, and killing life. Tom Campbell also thinks that what we humans experience in this universe as hard physical matter is an illusion, that there really is no hard physicality to this universe if we truly understood that the big mysterious computer generating everything is consciousness from another dimension, dreaming this dream we call our universe. And for Tom Campbell, this dream does not even need holography to explain this simulated universe. Tom says in his 3-volume book, My Big Toe, The Theory of Everything, that's a physicist's inside joke. It was published in February of 2003, and TOE, or The Theory of Everything, that all there is for Tom Campbell is computer code computing our reality to be a trainer for souls.
Well, if this is a simulation, who's in charge?
Right.
Who's the programmer? Where is it simulated from? Questions about this being not the reality, but a subset of something bigger. And what is this bigger thing? It brings up all of those metaphysical questions now that suddenly have scientific rigor. If scientific rigor says this is a virtual reality, then it cannot be computed from inside this virtual reality. It has to be computed from elsewhere, from another reality frame. It's computer code that's computing our reality.
If we are living in a computer simulated universe and the projector is outside in another dimension, is the computer projector God of this simulated universe?
Okay, no, the computer is not God. The projector is not God. The player is not God. They're just pieces of this larger consciousness system. So if you have a religious bent, then the individual units of consciousness are souls, and the larger consciousness is God, the source of everything else. Well, where does that come from? I only have 2 assumptions for my theory. The rest is logic. One is that consciousness exists, and the other is that evolution exists. Evolution just being a process of selection, that things that work go on and things that don't work don't.
Where did the prime consciousness come from?
It created itself.
What is reincarnation, the recycling